Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself, a podcast that helps us to keep kind, creative, and connected. My name is Rose Kondo, and I'm your host. I'm a poet, a performer, an aspirational gardener, and I love connecting with creative communities. In each episode, I talk to a fellow creative about kindness and about their work and some of the things that help them to keep well along the way. And today I chat with a fantastic poet and writer that I know from my days of living in Yorkshire. We talk about loads of amazing things like the power of a smile and listening and belonging. But before we start, can you think of a time when you laughed a lot? Like face hurts, tummy aches, gasping for breath, laughing? Was it at a show or at a film? Was it with a certain person or a certain group of people? I'm so lucky to have folks in my life that make me laugh. In particular, my lovely and wonderfully goofy husband and my supremely hilarious three siblings, like proper belly laughs with these guys. True soul nourishment. I hope you have some of this kind of laughter in your life too. Okay, let's get today's kind words rolling. My guest today is Mohamed Saloo. Mohamed is from Batley, West Yorkshire, where he still resides today. He's the youngest child of Ahmed and Hawa Saloo, who came to Britain from India in the 1960s, and he has three children. In his teens, Mohamed discovered a love of writing and sharing poetry. In 2013, he performed for the first time at the Batley Festival, which was part of the inspiration to co-found Batley Poets in 2014 to create a platform for bedroom poets to share their poetry. His passion for poetry has seen him deliver workshops to adults and schools, inspiring more poets to realize their skill. He has published poems in a range of places, and his first full-length collection, Batley Lad, came out in 2021. What a joy to be chatting with you today. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. And yeah, it was nice actually listening to that intro because it brought back a lot of memories that I'd forgotten, to be honest.
Ah, good memories, I hope.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Oh, lovely. Well, I always like to start off by asking what are some kind words that you've heard recently?
Recently, it's a difficult one, is that, to be honest with you. I have had. We're going through a bit of a difficult time. We know what's happening around us, but I've had a lot of people reach out to me. So, going to some of the local poetry events. I suppose more than words, it's smiles.
Mm.
For me. It's that when you pass someone and they just have that little smile, and you say hello to them and they respond, and suddenly you have a 30-second conversation. I had an incident yesterday where a gentleman with an umbrella was crossing the road, and I was about to start crossing the road from the opposite side. And we both kind of like went, as you do, to the same side and same side again, and they would do that umbrella tango. And we smiled at each other and just had a little bit of a laugh. And that really lifted my spirits. So, more than
Ah.
words, I think a smile, yeah, that does me well.
Yeah, I love that. Just a smile, whether you're at a poetry night or passing on the road in the rain, definitely. I find sometimes, I don't know if this is kind of bigging myself up in a way, but I think I have resting smile face because when I'm walking along the road, I'll often find people smile at me, and I like
Yeah.
to actively smile at people as well, but it does really just kind of catch you and give you that little momentary boost.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's wonderful. And yeah, the world would be a nicer place with more smiles.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. Well, thinking back then to memories that make us smile, I also like to ask my guests if they can remember how our paths first crossed. So we've known each other in poetry communities for a while, but do
Yeah.
you have a memory of when we first met?
Oh, I'm thinking, is it Queenie's? Where
Yeah.
we, yeah, where I was invited to perform. And I can't remember the year, but I've got a feeling it's about 10, maybe 11 years ago. And I think that was the first time that we met. We'd exchanged all the emails, but the
Hmm.
first time we'd actually met. And it was a wonderful night, and I still remember that. I have some recordings to remind me of that night.
Do you? Oh,
I
that's
do,
so
yes.
lovely. Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that probably is about 10 years ago. And
Mm,
that's the night that I host at the Lawrence Batley Theatre in Huddersfield in Yorkshire. And I was working at the theatre at the time, and it was in their little coffee shop, which is no longer. It's now like a studio meeting space, but it was this like
yeah,
bonkers little L-shaped coffee shop that we would pack full of people. And you came as
yes.
part of the Batley Poets, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes, and it was really interesting to perform to an L shape,
Yeah.
stood in the corner with the menu above my head. So, um,
That's
but no,
right.
it was brilliant. It was a wonderful night. I really enjoyed it, and probably one of the first. I can't remember if I'd been outside of kind of like the Batley area prior to that, or to a kind of like a poetry night itself. But it was in the early days when I just started to perform. So yeah, it's a wonderful memory.
Yeah. Oh, that's really helpful because I was trying to think about this before I record, and because we've crossed paths in so many different places, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember the exact point, and I think that was exactly it. And like
Mm,
you, I have really fond memories of that night. Oh, brilliant. Well, and like I read in the introduction, you have published work, you write a lot, you perform, you run workshops. We were both working on the Young Poet Laureate project.
yeah.
And that's a lot of hats to wear. I wonder, is there something in particular that you love about the creative work that you do?
Um, all of it, to be honest with you. But
Mm.
I mean, I love writing. I always have. It starts with uh, I always tell this story when I do workshops as well, or when I do a workshop called My Journey, and I take that to quite a lot of schools. And when I was 13, we read a story about medieval knights, and our teacher then asked us to write a limerick, and that was the first time that I wrote poetry, probably since junior school. Um, and I really enjoyed writing that. From there, I continued to write poetry, and I've written poetry all the way from then to now. Um, but it was because I just enjoyed and I love writing. I never really, uh, a few occasions I'll write because there's a commission or because there's a particular
Mm.
theme. Um, but most of the time, I'll write for me, and then I'll decide whether it's worth sharing. A few weeks ago, I was at an event and we did a Q&A at the end, and I don't know how we ended up on the subject. But I mentioned that I've written, as well as poetry, I've written a short story which I've read to a live audience, and I've also written 5 novels, which I have
What?
never done. Yeah, I've not done anything with.
Oh my gosh.
And I suppose that's the escapism side of it, particularly with
Mm.
novels, but even with poetry, because you can stop from the busy world around you and focus in on what's around you, what you want to say, what's my thought, what's my emotion. Not because I want to share that with someone, because I want to share that with paper with the paper in front of me. And that's a beautiful way of listening to yourself.
Mm.
And the other thing is that's that feeling of belonging. So whether I'm performing poetry, or whether I'm doing workshops, I feel like I'm in an area where I belong. And there's a difference between the sense of belonging and a feeling of belonging. A sense of belonging is when you look in the mirror and you say, I belong. I mean
Mm.
something. A feeling of belonging is when the people around you make you feel like you belong.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how I feel. Doesn't matter which school it is, whether it's a primary or a secondary or an adult group. I did a presentation to a elderly lunch club in a church, and it was brilliant. It was and
Yeah.
I was the only brown person there. Um, but it was brilliant because we connected over the poetry, and
Mm,
it's that feeling of belonging that I get. So I suppose looking at it, it is that love for writing.
mm.
Then poetry gives me that feeling of belonging that I love.
Oh, that is gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Yeah. The workshop sounds fantastic. And there's a part of me that's thinking, can I sneak into a school and just be a fly on the wall or something? Because it would be so brilliant to be part of a workshop with you.
Yeah.
I love the distinction you make between the sense of belonging and the feeling of belonging. And I think
Mm,
because we understand belonging to mean so many different things, I think that's something that can be relatable on so many different levels. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
beautiful. Well, we are going to jump into our kind chat. And for anyone who's listened before, they know I use the word kind as our roadmap, you might say. So I use each letter in the word kind for a word, and the first letter is K, and the word is kitchen. So I'd love to know what is in your creative kitchen, meaning what do you do to cook up or create kindness for yourself?
Oh, it's an interesting question. One of the things that I do now that when I was younger, I possibly didn't, is I don't compare myself. Now, I've never compared myself to other poets, um, but it was the comparisons that I used to make to myself and to the poetry I'd already written. I was thinking about this the other day, and in my late teens, there's a notebook. I still got the notebook, and I
Yeah,
created kind of like a spreadsheet in there with all the columns. The left column had the title of the poem,
yeah,
and then it had each column has a characteristic of a poem. So it was the rhythm, the rhyme, flow, various other bits and pieces in there as well. I think language used, that was one
yeah.
of them. Um, and that was about exploring new words. And I'd give myself a rating on each of those poem characteristics.
No
And
way.
yeah, I did this. I must have been about 19 at the time, and
Yeah.
then have in the right hand column would have a total number, and base mathematically as to which poems are really good. I think it's a flawed system. I don't. I think the only thing I learned from it, well, no, I think what it did for me was it allowed me to analyze. But I did used to compare my poems that way. There's a poem I wrote towards the back end of the 1990s. I hate to say it, but it's probably about 28 years old now.
Oh, don't.
Um, I know, I know. I'm trying not to remember that, but when I wrote that poem. Um, I actually remember telling myself, will I ever write something better than this?
Oh, wow.
And then 15 years later, when I first performed my poetry to an audience, that's the poem that I read. And I'd known when I wrote it, I'd known that there's something special about this poem. But
Mm,
15 years later, when you actually share it with an audience and you get that round of applause, and I ended up with a double round of applause that day. Um,
mm.
that's when you realize that, yeah, what I was thinking 15 years ago is actually true. I had to wait 15 years to share it, but
Wow.
so yeah, so I did have that, but and I did wonder if I'd ever write a better poem, but I no longer do that. That's my kindness.
Yeah.
I don't do that comparison anymore. I've written a lot of poems since, and sometimes the audience love one poem, and you think, I'm not really too keen on that one. It's nice, it's okay. But
Hmm.
and then you have another poem which you think, this is the bee's knees. This is the one. This is the one that should be sat on top of every
Yeah.
mountaintop, scribbled into the ice in color. Um, and and you end up with a nice, polite round of applause. I'm sure
Yeah.
you could. I know you're nodding, so I'm sure you can
It's a nod
appreciate
of
that,
recognition for sure.
isn't it? Isn't it? So I think poets are the worst to actually judge what is a good poem. If I'm honest with you, I think we can judge when it's right. We can judge when it's
Mm.
finished. But the audience ultimately becomes that judge. However, it doesn't stop me from reading what I want to read.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that whole comparison part. So yeah, so from the kicking cur of kindness to the curly cur of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, a comparison. I no longer
Mm-hmm.
compare.
There's so much just beauty and wisdom in that. And I love that you've talked through your own journey with that. So, as someone who loves spreadsheets, the idea of a self-analysis spreadsheet when you're 19 for your poetry is just like, I can completely understand that. And then to know that you have kind of, as a poet, as an artist, as a writer, evolved beyond that. I'm sure it helped you in a lot of ways to develop your craft or to give you some critical reflection on it, but that it isn't something that you rely on anymore. I'm also in awe of the I can really relate to those moments when you write something and you go,
Mm.
"Ooh, there's a special sauce here. There's a real
Yes.
sparkle, there's a real magic."
Mm.
It's you can't predict it. It's just suddenly you've written something and you go, "Ooh, yes, I feel there's something alive in here." I am in
Mm.
awe that you wrote something like that and that 15 years later you performed it and it still
Mm.
held that magic.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, and I changed one word, and that was the
Wow.
only thing that I changed in the 15 years. Um, the sad reality of it is it is about stereotyping. So the
Okay.
sad reality about it is that 15 years later,
Yeah.
that was still valid, and it is in my first book as well, and
Mm.
it still lives to explain that today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was the way in which I wrote it, the words that I used, the vocabulary that I was using for
Yeah.
that particular poem, the rhythm and the rhyme, and all those characteristics in my spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Um, they all got tens on that one. Um, so, but yeah, no, it's but sometimes you're right. Yeah, you know that something's got a special sauce, and then you just can't wait to share it.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
want an audience to share it.
Yeah.
And I have done that where I've written something and then on one occasion I wrote a poem and in the afternoon and I thought I really like this. And rather than go through it, edit it, wait for it to settle and everything else, I decided to join an online open mic at that time. There was someone was running an online open mic,
Yeah.
and I was aware that it was that evening. So I actually joined that evening just because I wanted to share this poem that I'd written in the afternoon.
Oh, wow. Wow. I really get a sense from you. You were saying this before too about writing what you want to write and sharing what you
Mm,
want to share. And it brought to mind, I think it was during lockdown, you were doing a lot on, it was either Facebook or Twitter or possibly both, where you were writing really whimsical stuff. I think you wrote about like custard creams or you wrote about your morning tea or something.
mm,
And it just felt so much from your present lived experience. But I remember
mm,
feeling such a sense of whimsy and connection in reading those short
yeah.
lines.
I did something called the Waiting Room Poets. And I started that. So this is, I think it was 2018, when it started. I was waiting on platform 8 of Huddersfield train station after
I know it
an
well.
evening class. Yes,
Yeah.
after an evening class at Kirklees College. So I've
Mm.
mentioned everyone there. And and I was waiting, and the train was delayed. I was sat in the waiting room, and I wrote it was actually a parody of a song. I can't remember the song anymore, but it was I think it was "Sitting by the Dock of a Bay,"
Okay.
Otis Redding,
Yeah.
and I rewrote the lyrics of basically sitting in a waiting room in a train station. Um, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a hashtag, and I decided to give it this waiting room poet hashtag. Um, and then after that, what happened, particularly around the COVID time, I wanted to put things out there that were whimsical, that had a little bit of hope as well, because um, obviously what we were going through, what people were going through, and I just wanted to share a little bit of hope. So what I started doing initially, I started putting these little four line verses on social media. Then I started to take pictures out of kind of like my window. Um, and kind of looking in the same direction to the morning sunrise, and just
Yeah.
looking at the different sky that we see every single morning. And no matter how many times you see it, it's different every time. And that then carried on, and I ended up posting over the years. I think it's over 600 or 700 poems that I've
Wow.
written. But a couple of years ago, I turned that into an exhibition.
Ah, I didn't know
So
that.
yeah, so I've
Amazing.
got the Waiting Room Poet exhibition, which is up presently in Batley Library on the balcony, and it's still there, and I've had a lot of wonderful things said about it. But also, in Huddersfield there's a Martians art trail over the next couple of weeks, and it's a selection are in the Park Cafe there. Um, so yeah, so
Brilliant.
it's another yeah, so it's taking photography and poetry and putting them together and seeing what comes together. But yeah, I'm always open to new ideas of how poetry can reach people.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way that you've kind of put your poetry out there that way. And that kind of leads nicely into the next letter, which is I, and the word is inspiration. And you've kind of been touching on this a bit, but can you talk more about where you find inspiration?
Um, I'm going to go for a cliche to start with, which is everywhere.
Yeah.
But everywhere is brilliant when you're able to write, or when you're in that writing mode. When you have a bit of a writer's block, everywhere is just terrible. Um, there's nothing there, and but it is everywhere. And I quite often get asked about this idea of how do you inspire to write a poem, and more so in the workshops, people asking where can I get inspiration from, and I explain that inspiration is really only looking at things differently.
Okay.
You see a cloud in the sky, it's a cloud. Um, you see it as a spaceship. Is it an arrival? Is it leaving? Are you about to board it to fly off into the wonders, or is it bringing the wonders to you? So as soon
Mm,
as you start looking at it differently, um, it can you're inspiring yourself, because
mm,
sometimes what happens with inspiration is that we tend to think that this is something that's going to come like a cloud and shower us down, and that's not. And then we're waiting and waiting and waiting. So to look at things differently, earlier this week I was at someone's house, and I just rang the doorbell, and I was outside, and I saw this red butterfly, and I'm presuming it's a butterfly, to be honest with you. But it was red, and he had red wings, and he looked like a butterfly, and he was just flying around the grass, but above the grass, and keeping like a 2 inch gap between. And me being me, of course, then you start thinking about it and say, well, why is that? Has the grass got a shield that it's not allowing the butterfly to go lower? Was the
hmm
butterfly a caterpillar before that used to run into the grass, but the grass doesn't recognize it because of the change now? Does the butterfly remember it used to be a caterpillar? Or has the butterfly forgotten what it used to be and sees the grass as scary because they're blades and they're pointy? And then that turned into a poem. Um,
Yeah.
so it's looking at things differently and letting your imagination go. And as soon as you let your imagination just run wild, um, you see things differently. And sometimes it is like the butterfly in the grass. Sometimes it's more about the emotions and thoughts that we feel.
hmm
Sometimes we feel helpless. Sometimes we feel absolutely, worried to the point of breaking.
hmm
Um, and for me, poetry has always been about that, about expressing what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. I was always very quiet, barely spoke until I was 16,
Mm.
um, and then haven't shut up since. Um, but it is that idea that, when you've got no one else to talk to, paper is a good listener. And
Ooh, yeah.
yeah, that's a title of one of my poems.
Ah, no kidding. I
That's a,
love
but
that.
it's true, because paper doesn't judge. It doesn't, it's not going to answer back. It's not going to interrupt you and tell you what's wrong with you. And it's not going to tell you what to do how to fix yourself. It's just going to listen. And sometimes what you do need is just something to listen. So inspiration is everywhere, but you have to search, you have to look. But just to share another story, I'm really
Mm.
good with anecdote. I love my little anecdotes. Last year, so 1st of January 2025, I was talking to a friend. I was having a chat, and for some reason, I turned around and I said, "Wouldn't it be cool if I wrote 1,000 poems in a year?" That was the 1st of January 2025. And this is my problem. This is where I'm not kind to myself because
Oh
give
gosh.
myself these ridiculous challenges.
Yeah.
And of course, once it's easy to say, and then once you start going, and I never wanted to overpressure myself. I had everything else to do. So it was about I still had to enjoy my writing. Um, and that's one of the things that I started doing. I started noticing things that are very simple. I saw buttercups on a hill and just thought about, okay, what about that? Then related to when do I remember last seeing buttercups and paying attention to them? Other,
Yeah.
and then you go into childhood and then you remember something from childhood. So I did a lot of that self-inspiring. I would probably say looking at things differently
Hmm.
to get those poem ideas so that to carry on writing and to write to the amounts that I was attempting to write to.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so um, yeah, I think that's it. I never worry about being silly.
Yeah.
Um, Silly is wonderful, and as is serious. Never limit yourself. I think
Yeah.
one of the things that I might have gone off point now, but one of the things that I get is I get people asking me when I introduce myself. Not as much now, but early on it was where people ask me, "Oh, what type of poetry do you write?"
Yeah.
And I always got snookered with that because I thought, well, to be honest with you, anything that comes to mind, really. It can be funny, it can be serious, it can be thought-provoking, it can be a tearjerker, it can be nonsense, absolute nonsense. I've written them. So I never knew, and form-wise, I've written lots of different forms. Freestyle is kind of like a favorite just
Mm.
because what it is, but even that kind of turns into some form and has some rules within it when I'm writing. But I've written sonnets and haikus and
Hmm.
villanelles and elegies and ghazals and all sorts. So I never know how to answer that question. And it
Yeah.
took me about 5 or 6 years before I realized the next time someone asks me that question, my reply is going to be when they ask me, "What sort of poems do you write?" I'm going to reply, "Good ones." And, and let them, yeah. So don't limit yourself. I mean, it is
Yeah.
really good. If you do have a bit of a writer's block, then it's really good to look at a form
Yeah.
um, and then see the rules of it. One that you've never written before
Yeah.
because that will allow you to think about, because you're thinking so much about the structure,
Hmm.
the words will start to come themselves.
Yeah. Interesting thinking about using the word kind as a roadmap because I'm hearing the sense of a roadmap a lot in what you're saying. And the whole thing about a roadmap is there's so much space for discovery and going off on, side roads and,
Mm,
discovering things that are surprising. And so the idea of bringing a sense of wonder, of looking at something a different way is is kind of an
mm,
example of that, of looking at something that may be really familiar, but giving yourself a different way through it.
mm,
And I kept thinking of the word wonder in
mm,
in what you were saying, partly because there felt like this childlike sense of discovery. And I don't mean that in a kind of simple oversimplifying it. I mean in that sense we all have as children of wondering, of thinking, gosh, what does that thing do? What could it do?
mm,
So that sort of question. But then as an adult, with a lens on, like you say, buttercups, the
mm,
sense of wonder in terms of awe, like, isn't that amazing? I wonder what it is thinking, or what, what the day has brought to this particular scene or this thing. And that then brings a lovely
mm,
discoverable form to something that feels very
Mm.
big or perhaps a little bit
Mm.
intangible as a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really
I mean,
beautiful.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that I say is poetry is the expression of thoughts and emotions by a poet, but it's the interpretation of thoughts and emotions by the reader. And
Mm,
it's like Buttercup Hill. As soon as you say that, most people will have a memory of something. Now, my Buttercup Hill will be located wherever where I'm living. Your
yeah,
Buttercup Hill will be where you were when you saw it.
yeah.
And this is the beauty of it, because and the real beauty of poetry, and this is the difference between writing stories and poetry. With stories, what you do is create the footsteps for people to place their feet in, because you don't want to get them to the end of the track, you want to lead them towards there. So
Mm,
in every step you want them to be here. Whereas poetry allows not only the poets to express themselves, but it allows the readers to take that poem and to relate it to themselves and to connect to it. And so I genuinely love poetry. It's as simple as that, really.
I mean, that's it. And that comes across so much in what you're saying. And gosh, poetry just contains multitudes. I think I've said that
Yeah.
in a previous episode of the podcast, but it really, really does. You've talked a bit about noticing in terms of looking at things, bringing a different lens to them, seeing them a different way. And the next letter in the word kind is N, and the word for that is noticing. But I would love to direct the question a bit more into what you're noticing about kindness these days.
Oh, yes. Do you know, I'm actually noticing a lot of kindness,
Yeah,
um, but I'm hearing a lot of hate. If the speaker the megaphones of hate are far louder than the whispers of hope and of love and of kindness,
yeah.
and that's only because this on one side there's a power, and or one side's being powered through an electric source, and the other isn't. Um, but what I'm kind of like noticing more is that it all kind of like, when you really think about it, comes down to um, different, seeing someone as different.
Yeah.
And there's this thing about, oh, if someone is different, that's wrong. And yet we all want to be different. We all want to be unique. It's like students when you see them all, and you kind of like, and we've been there. We know what that's like, and we're all dressing in the morning and combing our hairs in a way that we look different. We stand out, but we're
Mm.
actually at the same time also trying to fit in. So this is going back a couple of years, where I was walking towards a car park, and a river of students were walking towards me, and I noticed that they all were wearing the same colors: white, beige, brown, and you look at it and you think, right, this is about everyone wants to stand out, but everyone's trying to fit in.
Mm.
And that's a difficult thing to do, because ultimately we are all different. We all have different things. But what we find is that on one side there's commonality, that we do have commonalities that are there, and they're great, particularly in times that, like what we're going through at the moment, and when there's so much hate about that, we can use that commonality to show that, you know what, there's things that I love, things that you love, and we both that are identical. There's things that we do that are identical. We may take
Mm.
two, we may stir our coffees anti-clockwise or clockwise.
Yeah.
So there's a commonality there, but different is where we see the person. And that's the direction, if I'm honest with you, I feel that people, where we all need to go to. And I've written about that, but that's it. To give you an example, it's like when someone starts, or you have a new work colleague who starts, and you've been paired up. You've got to show them the ropes, and during the course of the day, you have your conversation to get to know each other. And it turns out you both like football, and it turns out
Mm.
you're both Man United fans. And then the conversation starts about the history of Man United, the victories, the great players, the terrible seasons, where we are now, and what's the future going to hold.
Yeah.
So the whole conversation, but you've got something in common, and you're talking about it. Whereas on the other side, the new starter turns around to you and says, "Oh, he supports Juventus," and you think, "Well, that's a little bit weird coming from Batley supporting Juventus. That doesn't really make sense. So you become interested in that. So you ask the
Mm.
question and they turn around and say, oh, my great grandfather used to play for Juventus. And then you go down the route, right, okay, so your great grandfather played for Juventus. Was he famous?
Mm.
Did he play for the national team? Is it someone I know? And then, oh, well, how are you here? What you're doing is you're showing an interest in the person.
Yeah.
And this is the difference between commonality and seeing difference. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with difference. There's a verse that I wrote in a poem that goes something like, different isn't a problem. It makes us strong when we recognize that different isn't something wrong.
Ooh. Can you say
And
that again?
yeah, different isn't a problem. It makes us strong when we recognize that different isn't something wrong. And that's what it's really about. As soon as we realize that, we all have our problems, we all have our challenges. And you know what? Sometimes we all need help to get through our challenges. Sometimes we muddle through them. Um, but we all have them. And to look at someone else and say they don't, um, it, we're not seeing them. We're not seeing the person. We're seeing a crowd. We're seeing a group. We're seeing a community. We're seeing a commonality, but we're not seeing the individual person. And then when we see the individual, then we realize that actually, do you know what? We can talk, we can laugh, we can joke, and I love your poetry.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully said. I think that when that commonality is seen in such a blanket and dismissive way,
Mm.
on top of lots of feelings that come up for that, there's a sadness on how much is missed
Yes.
from the beautiful uniqueness of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's what makes it so intriguing and so wonderful. Can you
Mm.
imagine if everybody was exactly the same? I'm afraid that's not really an interesting poets. What would happen to poets if everybody was the same? I'd hate to think. What would we
Boring.
write about?
Oh my gosh.
Even if every hill was the same, there was no Buttercup Hill. What would we write about? Um,
Honestly.
yeah, so it's a wonder. And again, it's that belonging in when I'm going to poetry events, because you know that there's going to be a room. There's going to be fashion in that room that's going to, you're going to have to wear sunglasses inside the room.
Yeah.
And you know that. And someone's going to come with a Hawaiian shirt. That's always guaranteed. Um,
Yeah.
but the thing is, it's that brilliance of different.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it such a special place to be,
Yeah.
because you know you're different. You know everyone around you is different. And you're allowed to express that different part of you, or you're allowed to express your full self,
Mm-hmm.
not a version of who people expect you to be.
Mm. I think there's a real presence of that in poetry communities. I'm thinking of an
Mm,
open mic that I went to yesterday in Manchester, and it's called Hinterland, and it's at this lovely
mm,
vegan, alcohol-free bar. It's
yeah,
run by Dominic Barry, and they have a featured guest, but Dominic is a consummate host on top of being a brilliant poet, and he always makes sure that all the people who sign up on the open mic get on. So, I
mm,
mean, there must have been upwards of 20 on the
mm,
open mic yesterday. And the the unifying factor in this incredibly wonderfully different room was that we all loved either speaking or listening to poetry. But
yeah,
beyond that, the differences were vast and
yeah,
multiple, and
yeah,
it made it for such a beautiful night of hearing so many different words from so many different people with so many different relationships to
yeah,
poetry.
yeah,
And without wanting to go full rose-tinted glasses, there are still challenges for sure, but it is in
yeah.
those moments where you can see what's possible.
Yeah, I've been co-hosting an open mic in Bradford City Library. It's actually 3 years in July.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's the first Wednesday of the month, just in case anyone wants to turn up. Um, but the beauty of it is that there's this kind of like family atmosphere that's developed, and even people who are new who come into it, after a little while, they become quite, they realize and become comfortable with it. And I think that's wonderful. And they can laugh, and they know that everyone at the halftime break that kind of like happens. I'd make it sound like a football match, but the break that we have, and everyone has those conversations and going over to someone whose poetry they've heard for the very first time. And Batley Poets in recent months have started an open mic night at Batley Library on Tuesdays, on the first Tuesday of the month, and that is in comparison, a very different way of doing things.
Mm,
And it's almost like, to an extent, the Batley Poets without it's so relaxed that it
yeah.
feels like you've just gathered together a group of friends, you're having your conversation, and then occasionally someone will stand up and read some poetry.
Oh, lovely.
And it's brilliant. And I know people who come to both, and they have remarked about how brilliant both nights are and how different they are. So you're
Yeah.
not overly pressured about what you're reading or what you're going to have to search for, or what. And there's people who have shared poems that they've not shared anywhere else as well. And
Amazing.
this is the beauty of these nights, really.
That's it. There are commonalities in structure, but they're all so unique in the
Yeah,
way that they're held, the way the space is set up, the way they're hosted. And I love that you have those two so close together in the calendar and they're so
yeah,
different. And this again is kind of leading nicely into our final letter. And the letter's D and the word is dream. And I get the sense that we're envisioning this idea of what we see happening at poetry events, what we see
yeah.
happening through writing, and how that might ripple outwards. So
Mm.
the question is really, Mohammed, what do you dream of for kindness in the future?
I do dream, or when it comes to dreams, do you know what? The biggest dream we all have is to be able to sleep comfortably and wake up comfortably.
Yeah.
That's all we really want to do. Um, and I do think with seeing more and more people connect with poetry, what tends to happen is that a lot of those misconceptions can get broken down.
Mm.
And it is kind of like poetry becomes a commonality, but then that allows that difference to be seen as well. So I'd love to see more poetry. I'd love to see, and we are seeing more poetry when we really look around. Um, but I'd love to see more people engaging with poetry. But the main thing is, I think I'd like to see more people looking and saying different isn't a problem.
Yeah.
um, and say no to the people who are saying, this is the say no to that, and say that no, different isn't a problem. We can I can go to sleep and wake up in the morning, and someone else can stay up all night and party. It's not a problem.
Hmm.
Um, as long as they're not living right next door to me, and
Yeah.
which they won't. Most people are considerate, to be fair.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but this is it. I think that people accepting, not accepting actually, people being intrigued by different, people being
Mm.
embracing different, people recognizing that they are different themselves, um, and that it's not wrong. I think that would be my dream. On the poetry, on a personal poetry side of things, I have to share that I still have hopes for more poetry books. I've got another poetry book coming out later this year, hopefully. That's
Ooh,
with
exciting.
yeah, that's with the publishers, and it's going to be different to the ones that have been released so far. So that's going to be interesting to see.
Wow.
There's a lot more humor in this one. Um,
Yeah.
which is surprising because the three books I've released so far are all quite serious. There's no really fun poetry in them, but this one's going to have the fun stuff. Um, so that should be good. So I do have I still want to release more books and want to have a wider reach and have my poetry reach. But there's other things that have happened that I've got to be honest with you, and I've just got to thank my stars. And there's things like some of my poetry is on some school curriculums. Um,
Really?
yeah, and then that teenager me who wanted to be a published poet and a known poet, um, I never ever expected that to happen.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because one school contacted me and said, "Would you mind coming in to do some workshops?" And I goes, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine." And then it was like, "Oh, by the way, we've got three of your poems on our curriculum." and you're
Oh,
alongside
wow.
wait till, and you're alongside Mira Sial and Benjamin Zephaniah. And I thought, right, okay, that's me
Oh,
done. I need
gosh.
nothing more. I need nothing more. Um,
Wow.
but so there's things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm delighted with what I've got. But and the dream, yeah, the dream in poetry would be to continue writing.
Yeah. I have no doubt that that will continue because you just seek out, like you were saying before, not waiting for inspiration to come, but seek it out in so many different ways.
Mm,
And what I also hear a lot in what you've said today, Mohammed, is a real kindness in approaching the 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 understanding of difference.
yeah.
And you were talking before about the rage being shared in loudspeakers and
Mm,
the kind of whisper of kindness and hope. And I think through the work that you are doing, it is raising the volume of it, but still so infused
mm,
with a kindness and a real integrity and an understanding and a grace
mm,
that I'm sure feels easier some days than others.
mm.
but
Yeah,
that is the fuel to really
yeah,
work towards a kind society.
yeah. And like I said, I mean, you've heard my poem that's about samosas and salad cream,
So
and
good.
and I mean, whenever I read that poem, it always goes down really well,
Yeah.
and people love it, and I'm really proud to have written it. I'm really proud to perform it and everything as well. But when you look at, if we were to analyze it, if the 19-year-old me still had the notebook,
Yeah.
um, when you look at how it actually fuses different cultures together, um, and how it shows different, and how the audience, and I've always had this, I think I've only had one person, so it's like 99.9% of the audiences who have heard that poem have said how disgusting it is. But they've all been able to say that in a humorous way, in a nice way with me, and they mean it. They genuinely mean it, and I think that's where we recognize that different, that we can
Yeah.
be different, and we can even be different to the point where we don't particularly like someone, a different thing of someone, but that doesn't mean we have to hate them. Um,
Yeah.
we can hate that thing, that one little bit, salad cream and samosas, but we don't need to hate the person. And if we were to understand that, I think it would be a wonderful step forward for humanity.
Oh, beautifully said. We are coming to the close of our chat. I could talk to you for hours.
I could talk for hours, to be honest with you. I often do, mostly when I'm driving by myself, but
Well, you're very lucky steering wheel then. But as we come to wrap up, I create this podcast to look at ways that we can keep kind, creative, and connected. And I'm always keen for top tips from people drawn from lived experience or wisdom, that kind of thing. And I'd love to know a top tip from you about how we keep kind, creative, and connected.
yeah, I smile. Smile will be my very first thing. Um, I wrote a little couplet. That's of course if I remember it. Um, Smiles are like dominoes. When you push one, it collides with another.
Mm,
And I genuinely do think that smiles can brighten a person's day. Sometimes, we might be having the worst day. We might have barely slept at night, woken up in a bit of a grumpy mood, going shopping, not particularly wanting to go shopping either. But you know what? You pass someone and you give a bit of a smile. Yesterday was a perfect example for me. The gentleman
yeah,
with the umbrella and his smile that lifted me.
yeah,
So we never know whose life and whose moment, whose day we're lifting just by the use of a smile. And a tip on the poetry side would be let the poem lead you. It's an it's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you are already writing poetry and you have a particular way of writing poetry. But what I mean by that is you've got an idea of a poem, you've got a theme in mind, you've started to scribble it, and you've got kind of like a form in mind as well. After that, just write the next line and then write the next line. And you'll be surprised where the poem will take you. And you'll also be surprised of what the poem is telling you about you.
Yeah.
So let the poem lead you, and it'll take you on some amazing adventures. I've started writing serious poems that have turned into an absolute riot of a laugh, and I've tried to write funny ones that have turned so serious that they've made me cry. So yeah, let the poem lead you.
Oh my goodness. Those are two just gems of top tips, and I definitely have spent the majority of this chat smiling. It's been an utter joy. I will admit, in the intro, I said that you'd published one book, but you have clearly published so much more than that. Where do you have things to plug, and where can we find your work?
Oh, okay, yes. So my website, the books are available via my website. I keep meaning to do more. I'm a terrible salesman. I honestly am. I'll take books to a poetry event and I'll forget to take them out of the bag.
Oh no.
Um, and I have a tendency of reading what of once I've published a book, no longer reading those poems. I don't know why I
Right.
do that as well. But to give you a bit of a, so my first book is Batley Lad,
Mm,
which celebrates my local town because I'm a born and bred Batley Lad,
mhm.
and I've lived all my life here. And I think, and regardless of what someone else might see it as, I see wonderful things there. So the first
Yeah.
part is a celebration of the place and the people, and the second part is about growing up and some of the challenges that I faced as well in my local town.
Mm,
There's a particular poem called My Barber's Chair, which reflects through the vision of sitting in a barber's chair at different stages in life.
mm,
Then the second book I released is called Loss, a voice of the grieving. And that was after my father had passed away. So when
mm,
my mother passed away in 2016, my mother was ill and she'd been ill for some time. So, and we had dad. So my time focused very much with to look after dad and or to spend time with dad. And after my dad passed away, which was in 2020, and it was just a couple of months before the COVID lockdowns and everything.
mm,
But I found myself with um, aimlessly walking. So I'd be at a train station, and I know for sure that I was at a train station, and I wrote some poetry just whilst waiting for the train. And I
mm.
never intended them to become a booklet, but I did turn it into a book, and I've been quite pleased because one of the things I've received is a lot of people have come up to me afterwards, have read the book, and said that there's a lot what they felt and they've been feeling guilty over, but actually they've realized now that someone else felt that too.
Right.
So that's Loss. And then the third one, which was released last February, is called Belong.
Mm,
Um, and that's a collection of poems that have been written over decades, and they do explore stereotypes and all that side, and they are written kind of like from the frustrations of hate, from the frustrations of hate, and the defiance of hope, because we have to have hope.
yeah.
And no matter how dark the night is, always remember that sooner or later the sun will rise. So that's the third book, and my fourth book, like I say, is with the printers at the moment, and that actually looks at everyday things. And I'm really excited for that to come out, and I will let you know when that comes out. And that's going to be published through a publisher. Um, sorry, it's through Vanguard Press. So that should be out and towards the end of the year, and I'm genuinely looking forward to it.
Oh, excellent. Well, and hopefully when I see you at poetry events promoting it, you'll take them out of
Yeah,
your bag and sell some.
yeah,
Because I will be first in line for a copy for sure.
yeah,
And I'm really, yeah, thrilled to hear about what you have written. And we'll put links in the show notes about how to find your work. And I'm sure if people follow your website, they'll see news of your fourth book coming out.
yeah.
This has been just a beautiful journey through these questions. I know we keep coming back to the sense of the roadmap, but what a lovely way to work through the word kind with such generosity and insight and wisdom. Thank you so much, Mohamed, for joining the podcast.
It's been an absolute delight, and can't think of a better way to spend an hour.
When you've got no one else to talk to, paper is a good listener. As Mohamed mentioned, this is the title of one of his poems, and these words really leapt out for me in our discussion. For me, and for many folks, poets or not, writing can be an invaluable tool for expressing thoughts that might be a bit tricky to say out loud. So thinking of a page as a listener is something that's really going to stay with me in a very comforting, encouraging kind of way. I'm also really alive to the themes of journey and discovery and curiosity that came up so much in our chat, and that sharing a smile with a familiar person or a stranger can be such a little boost along the way. Enormous thank you, Mohamed, for your words and your creative generosity. Be sure to check out links to his work in the show notes. In the meantime, thanks so much for listening. We'll have another episode coming your way soon. You can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, where captions are available. And please share a review or a comment if you fancy. It'd be great to hear from you. Have a Kind Word with Yourself, the podcast, is written, produced, and hosted by me, Rose Kondo. If you want to find out more about me and my work, drop me a line through my website, rosekondo.net, where you can also see amazing illustrations by illustrator Neve Wood, also known as Little Badger. Our beautiful podcast music has been composed and recorded by Eleonora Rosca. And finally, please share this. Help us to keep kind, creative, and connected.